My wife dropped 300 million on a villa just to make her new boy toy smile. The day the story hit #1 online, I asked her for a divorce. It was simple. My monthly allowance was $3,000. Lila was still surprisingly composed when we discussed the division of assets. She said, her face a blank mask, "If you can't make it out there, this will always be your safe harbor." I chuckled. "That's not. Your new flame wouldn't be happy about that." With that, I slowly stood up and walked away, my steps steady and unhurried. I glanced back to see Lila Vance, a woman known for her unshakable composure, still sitting right where I left her, her gaze lost and unfocused. The news that Lila Vance, CEO of Vance Industries, had spent 300 million on a lakeside mansion for her new beau was the talk of the business world. The new man at her side was supposedly a freshly hired designer at her company. He looked like he was just out of college, dressed in a stylishly minimalist outfit, exuding an artistic air with every move. People in our circle were all wondering the same thing. How had the CEO's taste gotten worse year after year? Someone replied, "You don't get it. Deep down, all women love a young, handsome face." Someone else mused, "That kid looks a lot like her ex-husband when he was younger." A chorus of agreement followed. See, women are all the same. They act like they're playing the field, but they can never really forget their first love. I stared at the screen and couldn't help but scoff. Lila and I had no way of contacting each other. Ever since we cut ties, the only thing that passed between us each month was a single bank transfer. 3,000. The memo read, "Living expenses." In her mind, winning over a new lover was worth 300 million. Getting rid of an ex-husband was worth 3,000. To call that a sign of deep affection would be laughable. Even though my relationship with Lila had been a marriage in name only for the last 4 years, seeing that man move into a 300 million lakeside estate still stirred something in Maine. It wasn't just about the money. It was more about the memories it brought back. I can't remember how many years ago it was. Back when Lila's first startup had just failed and she was only making 3,000 a month. We were living in a tiny, cramped rental, but she secretly leased a slightly bigger place behind my back. She smiled and told me, "William, when we're rich, I'm going to buy you the biggest, most beautiful mansion." I later found out the rent on that place was exactly 3,000 a month. That silly woman would rather live on ramen for a month just to spend her entire salary on a surprise for me. Maybe it was the sting of that 300 million that made me lose my mind, but I opened my messenger, found Lila's contact, and sent her my first unsolicited message in years. "So where's my mansion?" I didn't expect a reply, but as the night wore on and she remained silent, I tossed and turned until dawn before finally drifting off. Around noon, my phone rang. It was the butler, gently reminding me that I was late. I checked my calendar. Today was the fixed monthly date to see my son. It was also the day I dreaded most. I rushed to the mansion and saw Peter sitting on the living room carpet, playing with his toys. A young man was with him, watching him with a gentle gaze. To an outsider, they could have passed for a real father and son. I stood there, recognizing him as the man from the news. "What are you doing here?" I asked. He looked up at me, and his eyes instantly turned red. No wonder Lila would spend 300 million on him. Even his look of wounded pride was heart-wrenching. Just then, Lila came down the stairs, and a single hot tear rolled down his cheek right in front of her. Lila looked like she'd just showered, wearing only a silk robe. A drop of water trickled down her neck, tracing over an intimate red mark that stung my eyes. They're certainly getting along in that department, I thought, momentarily dazed. "What are you crying for?" Lila asked him, her tone soft and doting. "Ms. Vance," the man said, standing up and looking at her timidly, "I don't think William wants me here. I should probably go." He turned to leave, but before Lila could say anything, Peter grabbed his hand. "Don't go. You're not allowed to leave." The young man picked him up. "Peter, your dad is here to see you. I should give you some space." Peter shot me a venomous glare. "I hate my dad. He doesn't care about me at all. I only like you." Then, the two of them clung to each other, sobbing quietly. It made me feel like the intruder. I watched for a moment before speaking up. Maybe I should come back another day. It was meant to be considerate, but Lila's face suddenly darkened. She looked up at me, her eyes cold. William, do you think this is a hotel? You can just come and go as you please? I was about to answer when I heard the butler at the door of the study. Sir, Mr. Vance would like to see you. In the study. Mr. Vance was sitting on a leather sofa, his fingers drumming restlessly on the armrest as his sharp eyes sized me up. You're in poor health and have no time to look after Peter. Justin is the son of a distant cousin of mine. I specifically asked him to come take care of Peter. Do you have a problem with that? I shook my head. Mr. Vance nodded. As for you, he continued, a man who can't even hold on to his wife and child is the most useless man in the world. I mumbled my agreement. You're right. I am useless. Experience had taught me that arguing with Mr. Vance was pointless. Agreeing with him usually meant less suffering for me. But I never expected what he would say next. You'll sleep with Lila in the guest room tonight. Take this chance to have another child. Then you won't have to worry about Peter anymore. Couldn't believe it. Isn't Peter enough? Peter isn't perfect after all. It would be better to have another healthy boy, Mr. Vance said. If that's the case, wouldn't it be better to have one with Justin? I heard my own voice, suddenly cold. It's all Vance blood, right? Who cares who the father is? Mr. Vance was at a loss for words, his eyes darting away. He can't. And you're Lila's husband now. This is your duty. I should have said, I understand. But what came out was, I don't want to. Smack. I didn't leave the study until late that afternoon, the red print of a hand still stinging on my right cheek. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, splashing my face over and over with cold water. I'd been through this so many times. Why couldn't I ever control myself? As dusk fell, I figured they wouldn't be waiting for me for dinner. My stomach was starting to ache. Just as I was about to slip out, I heard a soft, "Dad." I froze. Peter was standing at the end of the hallway holding a Lego model. I quickly covered the swelling on my face and crouched down to smile at him. Have you had dinner, Peter? Peter stared at me for a moment, then suddenly threw the Lego model into the trash can. Why would you throw away a perfectly good toy? I said softly. You need to take care of your things. This ugly, Peter said coldly. I don't like it at all. I fell silent. Building things was admittedly not my strong suit. The Lego model was crooked and clumsy. You're not allowed to make Justin go away, Peter continued, frowning. I often think, if only Justin were my dad, that would be so much better. He glared at me with resentment. Remember, if Justin leaves, I will never, ever forgive you. With that, he turned and ran off. I remained frozen in place for a long, long time, feeling the blood in my veins slowly turn to ice. It was like an out-of-body experience. I watched my own pathetic figure crouching in the hallway. I don't know how long passed before I dazedly stood up and walked mechanically out of the mansion. Just as I was about to hail a cab, a black sedan pulled up in front of me. The window rolled down, revealing Lila's cold, emotionless face. Get in. Lila took me to a small, familiar shop nearby. The owner recognized us and greeted us warmly. The usual, 2 bowls of wonton soup? Lila shook her head. Just one. As I lowered my head to eat, Lila took a call. Justin, what's up? I couldn't help but look at her face. As she listened, the corners of her mouth turned up slightly, her eyes soft and focused. She used to look at me that way. But somewhere along the line, the distance between us had grown wider and wider, and our gazes had become colder and colder. The gentle girl from my memories felt like a dream. I even wondered if my memory was playing tricks on me. But now I saw it wasn't. She still had that gentle side. It just no longer belonged to me. In that moment, a profound exhaustion washed over me. What's the point of this marriage? I thought. What's the point of holding on for this long? The thought made me feel weak, and the chopsticks nearly slipped from my fingers. I wanted to cry, but not in front of the woman Lila had become. I wanted to laugh, but in that instant, tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. Tears and snot dripped into the soup, making even the wontons taste salty and bitter. And in that moment, I had a bizarre thought. Why did even Justin look so elegant when he cried? A pack of tissues appeared in front of me. Lila had put her phone down and was looking at me with concern. Did my father give you trouble again? She paused. You don't have to force yourself. You can always say no to him. Through my tears, I cut her off, my voice calm. Lila, you were right. It would have been better for everyone if we had never met. Lila seemed confused. What are you on about now? I took a tissue from my bag, wiped my face, and finally said the words that had been weighing on my heart for so long. Lila, I want a divorce. If someone had told me 6 years ago that Lila and I would end up as bitter strangers, I would never have believed them. After my parents died, I lost everything I had to lean on. My childhood was a blur of being passed from one relative to another. My life was always filled with uncertainty, never knowing when I'd suddenly be shuffled from one home to the next. Growing up like that, I was, unsurprisingly, not a very likable person. After getting into design school, I met the brilliant and popular Lila Vance. To this day, I don't understand why, with all the handsome and talented guys at school, she chose me. All I know is that first love was incredibly sweet, and sweetness is always fleeting. The first time I went home with Lila for the holidays, we hadn't even sat down before her parents threw out all the gifts I'd bought, along with the two of us. If you insist on marrying him, then you can forget you have us for parents. I shivered in the cold winter night. How could this happen? They're always like this, Lila said, her expression calm. Control freaks, always trying to run my life. Seeing my pale face, she playfully pinched my cheek. I couldn't help but laugh, dodging her hand and nearly tripping. Don't worry about them, Lila said, taking my hand, completely unfazed. I'm their only daughter. What parents can disown their son-in-law forever if their daughter stands her ground? The wide streets were covered in a blanket of fresh snow. Holiday decorations adorned the storefronts all around us. We wandered through the snow-covered streets, flakes falling on us until we looked like a pair of snowmen. We had nowhere to go, but after locking eyes, we both burst out laughing. After walking for a long time, I said worriedly, you should let me walk. I don't want you to get tired. Lila insisted. You have a weak constitution. If your shoes get wet, you'll definitely get sick. And who's going to take care of you then? Me. Besides, she whispered, it's only natural for a wife to take care of her husband. I blushed at her words, but she just turned her head and gave me a mischievous grin. Let's work hard, and in a few years we'll have a little one. Let's see if they dare kick us out then. My face was beet red. I gave her a gentle push, but lost my balance, and we both tumbled into a snowdrift. In the end, it was Lila who caught a bad cold. We spent the entire holiday in a hotel room. On New Year's Eve, Lila had taken cold medicine but was still feverish and delirious. I placed a wet towel on her burning forehead, praying her temperature would go down. But it remained stubbornly high. I was on the verge of tears. Though I never believed in gods or spirits, I found myself praying silently. Please God, anyone, just make Lila better. I'll willingly take all her pain onto myself. Late that night, Lila's fever finally broke. Exhausted, I fell asleep slumped over the side of the bed, missing the countdown to the new year. Much later, Lila told me something. She said that when she woke up in the middle of the night and saw my sleeping profile, heard the sound of my quiet breathing, she decided in that moment that she would never love anyone but me for the rest of her life. What if you change your mind? I asked her. Lila looked at me and said with dead seriousness, heaven and earth as my witness. If the Lila who betrays you ever exists, may she die a horrible death. Without her family's support, Lila and I had nothing when we first got married. Lila was supposed to inherit her mother's company, but she had a falling out with her family over me. Her father put the word out in the business world that no company was to hire her. Unable to find a proper job, Lila delivered food during the day and worked late into the night on freelance design projects to make money. As a design graduate myself, no company dared to hire me either. I ended up working the night shift as a cashier at a bakery. When my shift was over, I would bring home the leftover bread for Lila and me to share. We were struggling financially, but I had grown up saving every penny, so I didn't find it too hard to adjust. It was Lila, who had been pampered her whole life, who never complained once. As Lila took on more and more design projects, our lives gradually improved. At least we could afford to eat at a nice restaurant once a week and didn't have to pinch pennies on every purchase. Soon, Lila got pregnant. 10 months later, Peter was born. Lila was overjoyed, but she would often stare at her phone in a daze. She desperately wanted to share the good news with her parents, but she was too proud to make the first move. I secretly got her father's phone number from an old classmate. While Lila was asleep, I called and told her mother that our son was almost a month old. Sharon Vance, who was on a business trip, was ecstatic and said she would rush back to see her grandson. Who could have known that this one phone call would be the beginning of a disaster that would plunge us into endless pain? Perhaps because she was so emotional, Sharon's car collided with a vehicle driving the wrong way on the freeway as she was rushing back. The car caught fire on impact and plunged from an overpass, ending in tragedy. Standing in the funeral home, it all felt like an unbelievable nightmare. Lila and I knelt before the memorial altar. Mr. Vance walked over and, without a word, slapped me hard across the face. I didn't flinch. I knew deep down that I was to blame. "It's all your fault," Mr. Vance said, his eyes hollow. "My daughter wouldn't listen to me because of you, and now my wife is dead because of you." He looked at me, his voice trembling as he demanded, What did our family ever do to you?" He lunged at me in a fit of rage, but Lila quickly held him back. His heartbroken cries echoed through the funeral hall. Lila held him, her eyes red, but she never once looked at me. For the entire day, she acted as if I didn't exist. That silent indifference was more painful than all of Mr. Vance's accusations. After the exhausting funeral, we saw off the last of the guests. It happened to be Lila's birthday, so I had specially prepared a bowl of noodles, a symbol of longevity. Lila's gaze rested on the bowl, letting it grow cold before she finally spoke. Her voice so calm it was chilling. "William, it would have been better if I'd never met you." The noodles in the bowl were no longer steaming. I quietly put down my chopsticks. Lila watched me, her expression a mixture of expectation and surprise. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I've paid my dues for all these years." Saying those words that had been buried in my heart for so long felt like a huge weight had been lifted. Besides, I'm sure there are plenty of people lining up to be the design director's husband. "Fine," was all Lila said. She stood up abruptly, as if fleeing from something, and quickly left the dining room. Once the mandatory cooling-off period was over, I contacted Lila to calmly discuss the divorce proceedings. We quickly reached an agreement. "You don't want Peter?" Lila asked. "He'll be better off with you," I said. "And he'd rather be with you anyway." The lawyer finalized the division of assets, and the clerk at the city office stamped the documents. Just like that, the marriage between Lila and me was officially over. As we were about to part ways, it seemed the sharp edges Lila had developed over the years had softened a little. She was silent for a moment before speaking softly. "William, you're still his father. Let's just let the past be the past. If things don't go well for you out there will always be a room for you at the old house." I was stunned. After all these years, I was finally hearing her say she forgave me. But the person I was now no longer needed that forgiveness. I smiled. That wouldn't be fair to your new boy toy. Besides, I'm confident I can make a good life for myself." With that, I walked away with a light step. Lila remained seated, a thoughtful look on her face. I moved into a new place and had no contact with the Vance family for a long time. After years of being a stay-at-home husband and father, re-entering the workforce made me realize just how tough the job market was. While browsing job listings, I kept seeing updates about Lila and Justin. Either Justin was accompanying her to a design exhibition, or they were traveling abroad together for business. In the photos, Lila looked thinner, her gaze even colder. Justin was always nestled close to her, his eyes full of admiration. Someone on social media accused Justin of being a homewrecker, to which he promptly replied, "Sorry to disappoint you, but Lila is single now." Old friends started messaging me to ask what was going on. I sent a single, unified reply, Yes, Lila and I have separated. Everyone expressed their regret and sympathy, but only Jackson sent a different message. How have you been holding up? I answered honestly, looking for work, but it's not going well. Do you have any openings? Jackson replied immediately, I knew you'd ask me that eventually. You were tied down by marriage too early, and you became a father too fast. That's why you've been living in Lila's shadow all this time. Come work with me. Love, women. None of it is as real as having skills of your own. Reading Jackson's message, I couldn't help but smile. Jackson and his partner had started a design studio, and I was about to start a new life as an assistant designer. I worked overtime almost every day. Even though Jackson and I were friends, I didn't want to half-ass this hard-won opportunity. A festive atmosphere filled the office as my colleagues received gifts from their partners. I assumed all that cheer had nothing to do with me, but then my phone rang. Thinking it was a food delivery, I casually told them to just leave it at the front desk. But the person on the other end insisted I sign for it personally, saying it was a valuable item. I opened the document folder. Inside was a property deed. A standalone villa worth $500 million, located in the most expensive luxury residential area in the city center. I opened the deed. My name was clearly written on it. There was no note in the folder, but I knew where this gift came from. I put the documents back in the folder and had the courier return them. Time passed quietly. My long silent messenger app suddenly lit up. I thought you wanted it. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before replying. I don't need it anymore. A reply came back quickly. Ha! I blocked Lila on everything. After 3 months as Jackson's assistant, I was finally promoted to a full-time employee. Jackson asked me, William, we were friends before all this, but you don't seem to hold it against me that I'm just ordering you around all day now. I was revising a design plan. I thought for a moment and said, speaking of ordering around, aren't you the one who always gets my coffee from the front desk? Besides, didn't you have me start from the bottom so I could get used to the company quickly and avoid gossip? Jackson laughed. Now that you put it that way, I'd feel bad if I didn't promote you. I was intrigued. What kind of promotion? It's not a position. It's a design project for a major client. I have the right to recommend someone for the interview. My heart suddenly started to race. Are you saying you could recommend me? Jackson let out a low chuckle. It's not impossible. But back in school, you were top of our class. I wouldn't have had any doubts then. But the you of today, he gave me a teasing look. Do you still remember how to design? I promise I won't embarrass you at the interview. The interview was a week later. I never expected to see Justin there. He was just as surprised to see me. Then his eyes darted around, and he whispered something to the hiring manager. When I got the news that I didn't get the job, I was dejected, but Jackson was unconcerned. It was just a small project. There will be plenty of other opportunities. One day, while I was out to dinner with Jackson, I ran into the project lead from that interview. When he went to the restroom, I cornered him in the hallway. I briefly explained my design philosophy and my hope for a chance to collaborate. The man gave a few non-committal ahas, stuffed my business card into his suit pocket, and walked back to the dining room. A cold laugh came from behind me. I turned to see Lila standing by the sinks. In the mirror, her body was still, but her icy gaze was fixed on me. You'd have better luck begging me than begging him. I didn't answer and turned to leave, but Lila suddenly grabbed the hood of my jacket. She looked at me, sunlight streaming in from the windows on either side, softening the coldness around her. In that moment, she didn't look like the Lila I had married. She looked a bit like the Lila I had just met in college. William, Lila said softly, add me back on your messenger. I'll give you a design director position. How about it? I was baffled. I snatched my hood back and shot 2 words at her. You're insane. I sent my resume to many more companies, but I heard nothing back. 3 months later, the same project lead who had rejected me called. I have a project. You want in? And so, I finally landed my first design project. It was only when I got to the site that I discovered the lead designer was Justin. As for me, I was just a regular designer under him. At the very first meeting, Justin tore my design proposal to shreds in front of everyone. Yes, just from that description, it sounds like a classic case of workplace bullying. I even suspected that Justin had gotten me on this project just to get revenge, adding this humiliation on top of it. But the contract was signed. If I ran now, I could forget about ever working in this industry again. Besides, it was just criticism. I lowered my eyes and sneered internally. Haven't I been chewed out by Mr. Vance enough times? As expected, Justin shot down a dozen of my proposals during that meeting. By the end of the discussion, my pride had been completely crushed. He covered his mouth, his eyes wide and pitiful as he looked at me. Bro, this is all for the good of the project. You're not mad at me, are you? I didn't miss the flicker of triumph in his eyes. I sighed and looked at him. Actually, you're a bit of a disappointment. He looked completely bewildered, biting his lip. I didn't tell him that if you're truly determined to ruin someone, you don't leave a trace. This clumsy, full of holes approach was just too amateur. I couldn't believe this was someone Mr. Vance had trained. When I got back to the office, Jackson saw my face. What happened? After I told him everything, his expression turned grim. That bastard Justin. He's really asking for it. You just let him humiliate you like that? I recorded it, I said. Jackson gave me a look of approval. Good. At least you didn't take it for nothing. Pretty smart. Soon, a video appeared on all the major design forums with the headline, "Famous designer JT maliciously bullies subordinate in meeting." My face was blurred, but Justin's expressions were perfectly clear. As a result, Justin's already shaky reputation took a nosedive. My real identity was quickly exposed. The whole tangled mess between me, Justin, and Lila was dug up and laid bare by netizens. As the ex-husband, I naturally held the moral high ground. Everyone was convinced that Justin had seduced Lila, causing me to be abandoned by my cheating ex-wife. The public's disgust for Justin and Lila was as deep as their sympathy for me. Brands and projects that had been working with Justin quickly terminated their contracts. Lila, as the CEO of a major corporation, hadn't made any public appearances recently, so the impact on her was minimal. You could say that, by riding the coattails of Lila and Justin's notoriety, I had a brief moment of fame. Design firms and famous brands from all over started reaching out to me. But the most significant offer was the project Jackson brought me. You're the lead designer. If you agree, you can start tomorrow. But I have to be clear, the client is your ex-wife's company. So, William, think carefully about whether you want to take this project. I took the project file home and studied it all night. The next day, I told Jackson, the design direction is right up my alley. I'll take it. But I have to ask, was it Lila who wanted me as the lead designer? You wouldn't do it if it was her? I was silent for a long time before finally saying, if I had more options, I would refuse. But right now, I have no other choice but to accept. Good. You know how to play the game, Jackson said, lightly tapping my forehead. William, you've really matured. I gave him a bitter smile. Jackson continued, actually, I was the one who chose you. I invested $50 million in the project. With me backing you, no one can replace you. I stood there, stunned. I had experienced so little kindness over the years that, for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. 1,000 words swirled in my mind, but all that came out was a tight hug. Jackson blinked. Don't get too emotional. At my core, I'm still a profit-driven businessman. You just do your best. This project has at least an 80% chance of success. Although we were now working together, Lila and I maintained a polite, professional distance. Several times, Lila looked like she wanted to say something, but after seeing my cold expression, she would turn away, her face clouded. 3 months flew by. Then, on a rainy night as the project was wrapping up, whether it was the driver's carelessness or the poor road conditions, the taxi I was in suddenly lost control, skidded, and slammed into the guardrail. The world spun, and my ears filled with the screech of tires. I thought someone pulled open the door and held me, but a sharp, violent impact to my head sent me into darkness. I fell into a dream. First, I dreamed of Lila. She was sitting in her office, staring at the divorce papers, a cold smile on her face. William, it would have been better if I'd never met you. Then I dreamed of my son, Peter. He was holding a toy, looking at me with a hurt expression. If only Uncle Justin was my dad. I called his name over and over, but Peter just slung his backpack over his shoulder and happily walked away. The past flashed through my mind like a slideshow, finally stopping on one image. A funeral hall. My mother lay peacefully in her casket, surrounded by flowers and white cloth. Tears dripped down, wetting the lid of the coffin. My father stood behind me, holding back his own tears, his hands gripping my shoulders tightly. He was crying because he was now a widower. At only 6 years old, I was oblivious to it all. After the funeral, my father quietly left. I was abandoned like a little beggar in a rundown house. No food, no clean clothes. I had to rummage through trash cans to survive. After half a year, I was thin, dark, and filthy. Finally, my father returned. But when he saw me, there wasn't a trace of joy on his face. Instead, he broke down, yelling, "Why are you still here? Why did you have to wait for me?" Terrified, I hid under the table, trembling. My father stared at me, then suddenly grabbed a rusty knife from the kitchen, tears streaming down his face. "William, if I had never had you, would everything be different? All these years, I had always been the one who was abandoned. The people closest to me either wished I was dead or wished I had never existed. No one had ever truly loved me. Even the brief moments of warmth were just illusions, vanishing in an instant. I had always lived in the shadows, unloved, with no expectations placed upon me. If God let me live only to endure this suffering, then what was the point of living at all?" Looking at the man holding the knife, a hopeful smile spread across my face. "Dad, are you finally here to take me with you?" As my life was about to fade, I gave up the fight. I felt my consciousness dissolving into specks of starlight, slowly drifting away. Then, a song reached my ears. It was a sad male voice, like the lullabies my father sang to me in his arms when I was a child. "Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 merrily. Life is but a dream." He had wanted to end my life, but his eyes were filled with a deep, loving kindness. A sharp pain shot through my heart, but then the image of a smiling face flashed in my mind. Jackson. He was still waiting for me. He had invested 50 million in me. He had never given up on me. In that instant, a powerful will to live surged through my body. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital room. Lila was slumped over the side of the bed, asleep, with faint shadows of exhaustion under her eyes. I moved slightly, trying to press the call button for the nurse, but Lila's eyes snapped open, and she pressed it first. She stared at me. "William, is it so hard for you to ask me for help? Why are you here?" I asked. "You were in a car accident." I called the police. Lila's voice was hoarse. "They've already determined that someone tampered with the brakes. It was Justin. He bribed the mechanic. He's young and foolish. I'll apologize to you." On his behalf, Lila said. I shook my head. It wasn't Justin. Lila started to say something, but I pointed to the door. "Can you please leave? I want to rest." She got up and walked toward the door, then turned back halfway. "Who was it, then?" I met her gaze, then looked away. "It has nothing to do with you." Lila stared at me, and then her anger flared. She kicked the hospital room door. "Right, it has nothing to do with you. You almost died, and that has nothing to do with me, is that it? William, I wish I could cut open your chest and see if there's anything inside. Yes, my mother died because of you, but when have I ever blamed you for it? You blocked me, you changed the locks on our home. I was married, not widowed. In all these years, have you ever once fulfilled your duties as a husband? Have you ever once considered my feelings, or understood how hard it is to be your wife?" I was silent for a long time. "Lila, you were the one who proposed. So this is all my own damn fault?" Lila laughed coldly. "Then there's really nothing left for us to say." She slammed the door and stormed out, filled with resentment. I thought she wouldn't come back, but at noon, Lila walked in with a grim face, carrying a lunchbox. She didn't say a word, but carefully laid out the containers of food. "Thank you," I finally said. The nurse on her rounds glanced at us and said with a smile, "You two are such a loving couple." "Thank you," Lila replied. "We're divorced," I said at the same time. Lila's face instantly darkened. The nurse, sensing the awkwardness, quickly changed my fore and left. I expected Lila to get angry, but she just lowered her head. It was as if her perpetually straight spine had suddenly slumped. "William, I almost thought I'd never see you again. I finally understand. As long as you're safe and healthy by my side, nothing else matters." She gazed at me for a moment, then said seriously, "Look at you. You're so much thinner than you were in college." "William." She turned her face away, her voice choked with emotion. "It hasn't been easy for you all these years either. Has it? I was wrong. All this time, I was so focused on my own pain that I ignored the immense suffering you were going through. We can't change the past, but the future is still long. Can you let me stay by your side forever and spend the rest of my life making it up to you?" I didn't respond. I just remained silent. The room was quiet. The glimmer of hope in Lila's eyes slowly died out. "You don't want to? In the end, it's still because of my mother's death. You've always resented me for it." "What do I resent you for?" I asked softly. "You resent me for taking my anger out on you. So you finally admit it," I laughed. "You knew all along. You were taking your anger out on me." I emphasized the words "taking your anger out" and angrily turned my head away. That night, Lila had looked at that bowl of birthday noodles and said she wished she had never met me. At that moment, I had stood there, utterly humiliated. If I hadn't made that call, if I hadn't told her mother about the baby, Sharon wouldn't have come back that night. Lila's mother, her father's wife, wouldn't have died. An overwhelming sense of guilt washed over me. I just stood there, thinking over and over, why wasn't I the one who died in that car crash? After that, no matter how angry Mr. Vance got, no matter what he did to me, I never said a word. No matter what, I owed them a life for Sharon. But I never expected Mr. Vance to take Peter away. I held my son, refusing to let go, but Mr. Vance brought several relatives and forcibly took Peter from me. I called Lila, tears streaming down my face. He said I could give him back anything else, but he can't take Peter. How can such a small child be separated from me? There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Lila finally spoke. You lost your child, but he lost his wife. Besides, you can see Peter anytime, but his wife is never coming back. Letting Peter stay with him is just giving him a little hope to live on. Can't you even grant that small request? You can come back to the mansion whenever you want to see Peter. But William, my mother is already gone because of you. Do you have to drive my father away too? With every word I repeated from Lila's past, her face grew paler. It was those words that forced me to rely on handfuls of antidepressants just to function. Every time I think about them, I feel like life is meaningless, like it would be better to just end it all. Lila stared at me, numb. I continued, until one day my therapist said something that was like a revelation. He told me that what separates humans from other creatures is self-awareness. To build an accurate perception of oneself, to discover one's inner worth. In other words, to define oneself reasonably and to accept that self from the bottom of one's heart. To deny parts of oneself is to destroy one's own psychological foundation. Self-respect is the fundamental basis for the continuation of life. That was a wake-up call. If I kept letting your accusations and condemnations echo in my ears, I would eventually break down. I finally figured it out. My mother-in-law's accident had nothing to do with me. You shouldn't have blamed me for it, and you certainly shouldn't have used it as a reason to hurt me. As for you, Lila, no matter how many apologies you offer now, you can't erase the trauma you caused me. I choose not to forgive you. That's not just my right, it's about reclaiming my self-respect. Justin was just a pawn for you. If you really want to change, then stop messing with other people's lives. I said my piece. Please leave. Lila stood up stiffly, staring at me. There was never anything between Justin and me. I just saw how distant you were, and I wanted to provoke you. Anything was better than you ignoring me completely. I shook my head and closed my eyes, exhausted. That night, Jackson rushed back from his trip. He stood guard at my hospital room door, ensuring Lila couldn't get near me again. I was in the hospital for 2 whole months. The final checkup report showed that, thankfully, there were no lasting complications. I have 2 pieces of good news for you, Jackson said. One was that the final version of the design plan was complete. The other was that Justin had been sentenced to 3 years for attempted murder. After the verdict, Justin panicked and confessed everything in prison, including the fact that my father-in-law, Mr. Vance, had tampered with Sharon's brakes 6 years ago, causing the fatal accident. Jackson watched my reaction. "You don't seem surprised at all," he said suddenly. "It's like you already knew." It was true, I did know. I just hadn't known for long. One day, when my father-in-law was napping in his room, he kept calling out Sharon's name. His voice wasn't filled with longing for his late wife, but with deep fear and unease. That became one of the main reasons I finally decided to file for divorce. I had thought I was atoning for a sin, but I had been carrying a false accusation from the very beginning. Because of Justin's confession, the public learned that Sharon's death was not an accident but a murder. The police brought my father-in-law in for questioning. He vehemently denied it, but to reduce his own sentence, Justin provided a recording of a phone call Mr. Vance had with a family member back then. In the recording, Mr. Vance's voice was ice cold. That kind of woman, so glamorous on the outside, but she's been having an affair for ages. Every time I see her, I wish she would just disappear. She's going to see Lila tomorrow, tamper with her car tonight. An attempted murder case had uncovered an even bigger murder. This turn of events left Lila anxious and devastated. Soon, news came that my father-in-law, who was supposed to be in custody, had escaped. As the police launched a massive manhunt for him, I lay in my hospital bed with a sense of unease. I woke up with a start to find a hunched, dark figure standing by my bed, staring down at me coldly. I was shocked that it was my father-in-law. I had no idea how he had gotten into the hospital. His face was twisted. "Don't call me Dad." A glint of metal flashed from his sleeve. I immediately realized he had a weapon. My father-in-law was really going to kill me. "Dad," I said, looking at him calmly, "is something wrong?" He stared at me and let out a sinister laugh. "Aren't you scared? You were the first one to know. Why didn't you ever say anything?" He said viciously, "Now that the police have found out, I have nothing left to lose. I used to live in fear every day, worried you'd spill the beans. William, it's all your fault that my life has been so miserable." I sighed. "Dad, I never had any proof. Even if I had said something, no one would have believed me. What were you afraid of?" He raised the knife and sneered, "I'm already done for. If I'm going down, I'm taking someone with me." I remained seated on the hospital bed, watching him, not flinching or screaming. But my father-in-law's face, holding the knife aloft, began to show hesitation. "Why aren't you scared?" I looked at him, my mind racing, trying to keep my voice steady. "Dad, you hated your wife's betrayal, yet during my marriage to Lila, you constantly tried to set her up with Justin. You hated that your daughter listened to me more, yet you used every trick in the book to take Peter away from me, and even tried to turn him against me. All these years, has your way of fighting the people and things you hate been to become an even more hateful person yourself?" His expression clearly froze for a moment. "Peter Vance, do you remember your own name?" I said softly. "Before you married Sharon, you were a brilliant designer and independent individual not defined as someone's appendage. Hate has blinded you. You've not only hurt others, you've destroyed yourself. Are you going to continue down this path, making yourself even more contemptible? So what?" He was silent for a long time, then tears streamed down his wrinkled face, and he let out a crazed laugh. "I have no way out." He raised the knife to strike me. Just then, a figure burst through the door, tackled him to the ground, and the two of them rolled on the floor. My father-in-law frantically raised the knife and stabbed at the person on top of him. When he recognized who had tackled him, he let out a piercing scream. "Lila!" Law enforcement officers rushed in immediately, handcuffed him, and led him away. Lila was left lying on the floor, a bloody wound spreading across her chest. An officer beside her shouted, "Get a doctor. We need a medic now." Her eyes were still open, her expression dazed and vacant. We were only a few feet apart, our eyes locked. In her final moments, Lila used all her strength to say two things: "I'm sorry for all the pain I put you through all these years." And, "Honey, my heart hurts so much. It all happened so suddenly." I never thought Lila would show up at the hospital, only to die at the hands of her own crazed father. Despite all the resentment between us, what came to mind at that moment was a completely ordinary memory. That year, after being kicked out by her family, Lila and I had fallen in the rain. Lying on the wet ground, neither of us could be bothered to get up. We just lay there, watching the raindrops fall from the sky, our fingers intertwined, unwilling to let go. She looked up at the rain and whispered in my ear, "William, look. Do you think this counts as us making it to the end together?" The next day, Lila passed away from the stab wound to her abdomen after surgery was unsuccessful. All the love, hate, and grudges vanished with the wind. My first major project as a designer was the last real estate project Lila had personally overseen. Marketed as the final work of the Vance Industries CEO, the project was a massive success upon completion. Jackson would grin from ear to ear just counting the profits he was raking in. After Lila and my father-in-law passed away, most of their estate was left to Peter. I had a lawyer set up a trust fund to ensure his future was secure. I continued my work as a designer, and as my reputation grew, Jackson and I co-founded our own design studio. Not long after, I brought Peter back from the old mansion. The butler and nannies had been taking care of him. Perhaps because he had lost so many family members, he cried and threw himself into my arms when he saw me. "First, apologize to Dad," I said, taking a step back. "Because last time you said things that hurt my feelings." The little guy said through his tears, "I'm sorry, Daddy." I later found out that the butler had shown him the news reports. Even though he was young, he understood that people who go to prison are not good people. I didn't want to be too hard on Peter. He was only 4, and he had grown up with his grandfather, spending very little time with me. When he got older, he would naturally be able to tell right from wrong. Besides, I thought of that dream I had in the hospital. When I was 6, my father did want to give up on me, but not out of hate. Our family was too poor. Living without anyone to care for you was pointless. But he watched me curled up under the chair for a long time, and in the end, he gave up on giving up, his face wet with tears. He picked me up, washed me, and even bought me a lollipop. Then he knocked on one relative's door after another until he found a family willing to take me in. He had intended to abandon me, but in the end, he gave me a warm embrace before disappearing alone into the vast world. People in this world seem to be like that. A mix of kindness and darkness, a glimmer of light hidden within evil. Even now, I can't quite say what I'm living for. Perhaps there's no need to ask for meaning in the first place. After all, life's endings are rarely what we hope for. It's either separation or a tangled web of love and hate. But none of that matters. To have experienced those unforgettable moments together is enough. Because a moment of sincerity is an eternity of meaning.